Good morning and welcome to the April meeting of the Health Scrutiny Committee for Lincolnshire. My name is Councillor Richard Cleaver and I'm the chairman of this committee. On my right is my vice chairman, Councillor Chris Reeve, and on my left is our Democratic Services Officer, Jess Wasser-Yates. And also present in the chamber is our Scrutiny Officer, Kiaria Hajianu. For those of us in the chamber, if we have a fire alarm, we need to leave through the rear doors, move through reception and assemble in the car park at the front of the building and await further instructions. In addition to welcoming all members of the committee to the meeting, I would also like to welcome Councillor Steve Clegg, who is Executive Councillor for Adult Care and Public Health, and Paul Locke, who is the Executive Support Councillor. Other participants will be introduced when we reach their item or when they first speak. This meeting is being streamed live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online after the meeting. With this in mind, I would like to welcome any members of the public and press who are watching. Can I now remind everyone to ensure that their mobiles, laptops and iPads are all set to silent. So we now move into the agenda. First item is apologies for absence replacement members. Jess, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Lee and Councillor Welbury. We also have Councillor Watts replacing Councillor Currier, Councillor Pessell replacing Councillor Haiggs, and Dean O'Dowd replacing Liz Ball on behalf of Health Watch. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Pessell, again. Welcome, Dean, and welcome, Councillor Watt. Second item on the agenda is declarations of members' interests. Do any members wish to declare an interest? No? Okay, thank you. I, as usual, need to declare that I'm an LCC appointed partner governor of the North West Anglia Foundation Trust. Item 3 is the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 25th of February 2026. To confirm the minutes of the meeting held on that day as a correct record. These can be found on pages 3 to 12 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Mackinson-Saunders. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Kendrick, I saw you first. All those in favour of adopting the minutes, please show. All those against? That is carried. Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda is the Chairman's announcements, which were circulated with the agenda as pages 13 to 20 and then updated as a supplementary document on the 26th of March. This was to reflect the response received in relation to section 4.4 and also to include section 4.6. I would like to mention that in addition to the update, section 1.1, Cliff Village's medical practice, an email was circulated on the 30th of March informing us that the Lincolnshire ICB has decided permanently to close the dispensary at Cliff Village's medical practice, effective from 6 p.m. on Friday the 2nd of April, due to regulatory requirements and changes to the practice's contractual arrangements. Patients have been informed to nominate a community pharmacy for their prescriptions or to register with a different GP that offers dispensing services. The local LCC member has raised concerns, and as chairman, I am pursuing these with the ICB directly. Moving on, Councillor Louise Haiggs has resigned from this committee due to personal reasons. Until permanent arrangements are made, I welcome Councillor Pessell as an interim replacement for this committee. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank Councillor Haiggs for her contributions to the committee and for the thoughtful way in which she always approached the work. Her involvement has been greatly valued, and on behalf of all members, I wish her all the best. Does anyone have any comments on or points to make about the Chairman's announcements, please? Councillor Mackinson-Saunders.
Could I follow up, please? Martha's rule. How do people know that that's available to them, or are they just meant to just know? And the other thing I was going to ask, is there any update to Spilsby surgery, please? Thank you.
On the first point, I do believe, I've certainly seen publicity around it. It has been fairly well publicised as far as I know, but we can take that on board with the people who are responsible. And I don't have any update for you on Spilsby, so that we can sort that out for you outside the meeting.
Are the signs and things in hospital, are there signs up in hospital or any leaflets in the hospitals to indicate? But perhaps we could find out. That'd be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor McGee, thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to second that, actually. Like, obviously, we're in a sphere where we're having this information coming to us, but I've not actually seen any advertising. And just as a member for West Lindsey, I'd like to say that I'm very pleased to see that that is coming to John Copeland Hospital. But if we could feed back that some advertising would be really helpful.
Thank you. That is noted, and we'll follow up. Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Kendrick, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested in the report on the Haven side, the new adult mental health ward at Boston on the Norton Lee site. I was just wondering, I can't remember how many beds were on Ward 12. It's a while since I worked for the Trust. I was just wondering whether there's an increase or decrease in the number of beds due to that unit. Obviously, I wouldn't expect you to know the answer, but I wonder if we could find out. Thank you. Yes,
certainly. We can ask that question of the ICP. Thank you. Anyone else? No? Okay. So I take the Chairman's announcements as noted. Thank you. So we now move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the East Midlands Ambulance Service Performance Update. Item 5 was circulated as part of the agenda pack on pages 21 to 106. This report provides an update on current EMAS performance in the Lincolnshire division and to provide further assurance progress made since the last update the committee received in March 2025. Our presenters in person are Sue Cousland, the Lincolnshire Divisional Manager, Neil Scott, Service Manager Development, Claire Smith, Divisional Admin Coordinator, and Oliver Newbold, Non-Executive Director. Welcome to you all. Would you like to talk through your report's key messages? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Just to make a slight adjustment, you will note that we have Wayne sitting with us at the end, who is definitely not Claire. But Wayne Madison is our new Divisional Senior Manager for Transformation, and we've highlighted the work that he's doing in the report. So he's come in an observer capacity, but happy to answer any questions in that direction. So thank you for receiving us this morning. As you've just said, our last update to you was March 2025. I'm happy to take queries or questions throughout the discussion. I'm just going to lift the salient points from the report. So we have actually covered 9 areas, which includes a raft of appendices. Apologies for the reading, but hopefully you will have found some of that background useful. We would also, because in recognition that a large number of the committee are new members, if it would be at all helpful to come up to Bracebridge Heath, to our headquarters, to where we have one of the call centres and also the accident and emergency side of the business in operation. So very happy to do what we call the 10-cent tour. So hopefully that will help consolidate some of the information in the report. And contact would be via myself to arrange that. So at our previous meeting, concerns were raised to us around our performance to national ambulance standards, hospital handover times, and also adequate levels of recruitment and retention, particularly in relation to qualified staff. I hope the report demonstrates an improvement in all 3 areas, although we recognise that there is still a lot of work to do. We have, as part of a trust update, we have appointed a new clinical director, Dr. Stephen Dykes, who has joined us from Yorkshire Ambulance Service, where he was Deputy Medical Director. And we're delighted that our Link non-exec director, Ollie Newbold, is with us today. And Ollie links in on all matters of business with the division on a regular basis, which we find extremely helpful. Section 3 just outlines the national visions. So two elements that I wanted to bring to attention was the Ambulance Association of Chief Executives paper produced in March 2024, where it very clearly states that ambulance services have a key role to play in prevention, in responding to emergencies, but also doing more for patients in the community. And hopefully we are able to demonstrate through the appendices of our strategies and also the 10-year plan, NHS 10-year plan, that that's exactly what we are doing. So the three elements of the 10-year plan that we are focused on is the transitioning of hospital to community care, focusing on prevention over treatment, and a shift from analogue to digital. And I've included the paper that went to Trust Board in September 2025 to actually highlight the Trust intent in relation to the 10-year plan. And the elements in that section are lifted from that particular paper. We then move on to section 4, which is the performance improvement, and I'm going to hand over to Neil to walk us through that particular section.
Thank you. So the performance section 4 in the paper, the lion's share of what I'm going to be discussing is our category 2 performance. The reason behind that being that is the significant chunk of what our activity is within Lincolnshire, within an ambulance service regionally. So on a day-to-day basis, we have a divisional tactical cell, which is led by one of our managers that provides real-time conducting of how the ambulance service operates on an hour-by-hour, minute-by-minute basis. The primary focus of that is that performance delivery and safe patient care delivery, and they're plugged in and interacting in a real-time basis with their opposite numbers in ICB, acute trusts, community trusts, other emergency service delivery. As you can see in section 4.3 with regards to our category 2 performance, from April 2025 through this financial year, we've seen that 30 to 40 minute performance band very much there through to the autumn, and then a significant upsurge in what our response times have been doing as we've passed through winter, with that peak through December and January 25 into 26. That's not just been experienced in Lincolnshire, that's almost a graph you could replicate with slightly different numbers in any county, in any region across England and Wales in terms of what ambulance C2 delivery looks like. As has previously been discussed at this committee and in other forums, that performance is a marker of what our response capability looks like. The currency that we use in the ambulance service is respondable hours. So ambulance's ability to respond, how many response hours we've got to inject into the system to provide that patient care. Anything that detracts from those response hours impacts on our performance times. One of the key elements that does detract from those respondable hours being available is hospital delays, which will come as no surprise. Again, not a local problem, it's a problem we see across the country. But figure 3A, which shows the lost hours, so the lost response hours due to pre-hospital delays, as you can see, is an almost mirror of that trend that has been seen also in the performance chart as well. That being said, we are working extremely hard with our acute hospital colleagues, especially at ULTH, in driving those pre-handover times down alongside the 45-minute threshold that has been set as an almost never position in terms of that being a line that won't be crossed. And we've seen real leaps and bounds with that as we've come out of winter into this springtime. In terms of our elements of that, of lost hours, which is the post-handover element, so that is when an ambulance crew is handed over to the hospital staff and they've prepared their ambulance for the next incident. We've been doing a lot of work on that through this past year, and figure 4 in the report shows that we've really tried to drive down that average position and get our post-handover times down. It's part of what we do, not just with hospital times, but with any efficiency on that day-to-day basis. So as I mentioned at the start, our tactical cell has oversight of what's happening. They will be looking to gain efficiencies whenever they can through the working day, be that making sure it's the correct number of responses going to an incident, but equally making sure there's not too many responses going to an incident. It's making sure that we're spending the right amount of time with patients, but not too much time if there's delays that can be reined back, which then injects more response time for those calls that are waiting. The final section, in section 4, just goes over conveyance activity. So fundamentally, what we want to achieve is only taking people to hospital that fundamentally have a need to go to hospital. It is not always in someone's clinical benefit to go to hospital, and in many clinical situations, being in hospital can be in itself detrimental. It builds onto waiting times, and a good example of that is patients suffering from dementia. That can be a real negative impact on their overall health because of the time they spent. So something that we really work and strive hard on is improving that conveyance to hospital position. So if we can safely look after someone on a telephone call, and in section 4.4 that's what hear and treat refers to, or if we can look after someone in their own home without conveying them to hospital, which is what see and treat refers to, we're always trying to implement and increase that percentage to be an improved position. The secondary benefit of that being, of course, if we're not conveying the person to hospital and it's the right thing to do for them, we're not losing hours at hospital with delays that we're experiencing there. And in terms of Lincolnshire itself, as a ICB area of the Lincolnshire branch of EMAS, we are sitting in a good position in terms of keeping that conveyance to emergency departments numbers low and keeping patients where they should be in the safest place they can be for the recovery from the clinical condition they're experiencing. The next section moves on to workforce, so I'll hand back to Sue Cousland for that.
Thank you, Neil. And just it's worth noting that the performance targets for the arrival of an ambulance in whatever category are set nationally. So that doesn't make any difference as to whether you are in a city or whether you're in a really rural community like the one that we serve. The other element is, yes, we do need the time targets to adhere to. But if you are someone or a family who's experiencing cardiac arrest, they expect us to arrive within 7 minutes. If we arrive within 7 minutes, we can have an unfortunate outcome for the patient and family. If we arrive afterwards, we can often have a positive impact. So my point is that the time target is not always relevant, because it would be seen that we've failed the target, but for those patients we are able to successfully resuscitate, that is a real successful outcome for the patient and their family. So it's just a point to make, Chair. So workforce, we're really quite proud of the improvements that we have made, and we will continue to strive over the next couple of years to supplement that improvement. The skill mix position, as in figure 8, demonstrates that we are improving the number of registered clinicians available in the community. So these are people who are paramedics who are registered centrally. So you will see that the forecast figures outturn for March is just shy of 40%, whereas we were 6% or 5.5% lower at the beginning of the year. And we are hopeful that we will be able to recruit more registered staff, and we are training our own, as I will refer to a little later in the report. So Neil's referred to the abstraction. So this is the available hours that we have to respond. One of the elements that is very much within our control is sickness and absence management. And I'm pleased to say we have continued to demonstrate that we have the lowest sickness absence rates in the region. And we will be below 6%, and we will be the only division in EMAS to achieve that. There's further work to be done because the national figure is 5%, so we will be working very hard in this next financial year to achieve that. We have a number of initiatives to help support staff, and when you consider that the majority of our workforce is in the more mature bracket, such as myself, I think that is really demonstrating good support. 5.3 refers to the clinical hub, that we now have an expanded clinical hub within EMAS. It is not part of the division that we manage, but we work very closely with our colleagues in our Emergency Operations Centre. So over the last 2 years, additional funding has been received so that we have a bank of paramedics and nurses, all qualified, some of whom are very senior. We also have mental health clinicians now on duty 24 hours a day who are able to help and assist with calls that come in. And again, referring back to what Neil was saying about hear and treat and see and treat, they actually help us significantly to target the right clinical qualification to the right emergency. The quality initiatives, quality strategy, we've given that as Appendix D. There are 5 strategic aims, 3 of which are pulled out as part of the clinical strategy. It would be no surprise to deliver safe, effective and compassionate care, delivery of outstanding care, and working in partnership to reduce health inequalities. So Neil's already referred to the good working relationships that we have across the system, not just with our colleagues in ULTH, but also to the north of the patch, for Northern Lincolnshire and Goole, and also to Peterborough and Queen Elizabeth King's Lynn. We have a professional support and learning structure within the division that is now entering its 5th year, again seen as best practice within the organisation. It has been designed by the staff themselves, delivered by our clinical team, and 40% of staff have accessed this in the last financial year, which is over and above the training that they get that is statutory. In terms of management of controlled drugs, we have just implemented an electronic controlled drugs register, which gives us much greater oversight and security around the controlled drugs that we carry in our vehicles and also have on our stations, and that helps compliance with Home Office regulation. Care Quality Commission we have undertaken within division recently, and we do it regularly, but we've just refreshed it, a gap analysis in relation to the evidence that we would be able to present should the Care Quality Commission either request it or carry out a planned or unplanned visit. There are a number of efficiency initiatives, again going back to making sure that we have as many resource hours available to us every day that we possibly can do. There is a fairly high-level section in relation to what we do with our call cycle. So our call cycle starts from the receipt of the initial phone call from a patient or a family member. And we are aware in Lincolnshire that we do take longer when we are on scene with patients. But again, I go back to patient outcome. Is that because we're trying to find the most appropriate response for that particular patient? Clinical effectiveness, we are actually monitored as to the level of clinical care that we deliver when we arrive. We continually strive for improvement, but again, I'm pleased to say that across all of the elements of the indicators, we are achieving a higher percentage performance than the rest of the trust, which again, given the rurality of the service of the county that we support, I think that is really quite remarkable. We have a lot of people initiatives because without our people, without our staff, we're no good and we wouldn't be able to provide what we needed to for patients. We've known for a while that development positions have been a useful addition when we're recruiting, particularly for performance. And without wishing to embarrass, I'm going to use Wayne as a prime example. Wayne's been working with us in a different capacity for many years, has actually worked very hard to develop himself and was successful at interview earlier on this year. So we're delighted because he's already making a significant improvement. But we're actually using the development roles for staff to actually try a role before they buy it to see if it is for them, because it's not always the case. We did have another role, which was the Divisional Senior Manager for Workforce. That was an interim role that we had short-term funding for to help with our workforce, our attrition, our retention issues. And I think you can see by the previous table that we are able to demonstrate a strengthening position in relation to our workforce. We are expecting, we don't know the number, but we are expecting a number of new paramedics coming into the division over this next financial year. And again, we will welcome them the same way that we have done in the past. I've mentioned already Wayne in his new role for transformation. Wayne is currently working through a number of objectives to see where we as a division can be much more efficient than we are already. We've identified a few areas. This is a role that is really a part of a trial for the whole organisation, with learning that we take in Lincolnshire to be transposed across the region. A very strong linkage with transformation with the System Clinical Reference Group, which is chaired by the Deputy Director, Medical Director of ULTH. We're very fortunate. We have 2 pathway leads who have created over the last few years a total of 91 alternative pathways for patients other than going to an emergency department, which, as Neil has already said, isn't always the right place for them. So some examples of that are patients with urinary catheters, some types of head injuries, care delivery in nursing and residential home, where somebody's had a fall or somebody's had a skin tear. We can now actually treat those patients very differently to the way that we did 2 to 3 years ago, which is absolutely the right thing, because the majority of those patients are vulnerable, usually older patients. We're looking at how we collect and analyse data. We have a lot of data, so we're data rich, but what is it telling us? So we're looking more and more into what that is telling us. And we are also sharing that data with clinical colleagues individually, so they can see how they compare to other colleagues as to their post-handover time, how long they spend on scene. And they're really quite hungry for that information, and they all have an individual iPad that's their own personal iPad that they get information on, and Wayne's working really hard for them to get that information directly to their iPad. As we've already said, we work collaboratively across a number of different areas, including community responder groups. Lives, fire and rescue, and our military colleagues all support the work we do every day. Reward and recognition is extremely important. We don't do it enough, I don't think, but we do have an excellence reporting system that people can use either internally or externally to actually raise something that somebody might have done that has gone above and beyond. And I know that staff really enjoy receiving those. And when we do have external compliments, I write personally to the members of staff who have been complimented, because they don't see how much of a difference they make very often. We had our annual awards ceremony a couple of weeks ago, where we actually recognised over 800 years of service within the division, which again is quite remarkable. And we had the Lord Lieutenant, who very kindly came. I think he really enjoyed himself, actually. He came and helped us congratulate the staff. The divisional people plan is something that we refresh 3 times a year. That is contained as Appendix C. We're just about to refresh it again following the National Staff Survey results. We've only just got them, and we're just working our way through what that tells us. The response rate of 52% may seem quite low, but this is a voluntary option for people to talk to us. But we have many different ways for staff to talk to us over and above completing a form. We are improving our response rates and we have improved on a number of areas this year. But interestingly, one of the areas that we're looking at will be our appraisal system, because the staff are telling us that it's not really giving them what they need. So that will be one of the focus in the next couple of months. Sadly, violence and aggression towards our frontline staff is still quite prevalent. We are noticing a reduction, which is encouraging. We are using body-worn cameras, but that is a voluntary element. But through the use of body-worn cameras, we have been able to successfully prosecute members of the public who unfortunately feel the need to be aggressive towards our staff. We do need to be aware that aggression can be because of a physical or psychological condition, so that is always taken into account. But one act of aggression is still too many as far as we are concerned. But our security team work very closely with local police forces as well to support staff. Section 8 just covers our statutory duties as part of the Civil Contingency Act. We're not just a yellow vehicle with a blue light on the top. We have some statutory duties to perform as part of emergency preparedness, resilience and response. I've detailed those for you. Happy to take any further questions, but we do train regularly with Humberside Resilience Forum and Lincolnshire Resilience Forum. And again, just draw your attention to the education, the command education achievement of the senior team, which is 100% throughout this year, because we never know when we may have a Manchester Arena, heaven forbid, happen on our patch. Section 9 gives the number of appendices that are there for apologies for the length of it, but for bedtime reading. Other than that, Chair, I'm happy to take any queries or questions people might have.
Thank you very much. So we do now move to questions. Members of the committee, please indicate to me or the Vice Chairman if you wish to speak. We already have a list here. Starting with Councillor Morgan, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation and all the work that you all do, which is amazing. And from what I understand, generally really well received in the community. So thank you so much. Moving on to the process that you use, I'll call it HAT and STs. It's what you've called it. So the hear and treat and see and treat. Do you do any quality checks going back to assess whether you've actually used the right mechanism for, if I use that phrase, for diagnosing the patient's needs? So you ever say, well, actually we did a call, but actually they should have gone to A&E, for example?
Yes. In answer to your question is absolutely yes, we do. That is a regular audit process, and we have an audit team, a standalone audit team that do that on our behalf. That report goes to our clinical governance group, and any areas of identified learning, both poor practice or good practice, is actually demonstrated through that, not only to the individual, but also to the wider team.
Thank you. Vice Chairman next.
Thank you very much. The rural nature of Lincolnshire obviously presents its own problems compared, it's hardly fair to compare times to city centres and that, but years ago there used to be a policy of stationing ambulances away from the normal station. For example, Cambie Corner, not far from where I live, is an intersection of two major roads. It's 10 miles from Gainsborough, 10 miles from Lincoln, 7 miles from Market Race and 10 miles from Scunthorpe. Nice central location. Are those sort of locations still used when ambulances, rather than going back to the main station to give a quicker response time, or is that not the sort of policy you pursue nowadays? Thank you.
No, that's absolutely still the policy that we have. The reason you don't see, they're called standby points, and we move staff to those for a period of 2 hours and then move them on. The reason you don't see ambulances in and fast response vehicles in standby points as much these days is because they're busy. And they only go to standby points when they're available. And interestingly, I was in Cleethorpes yesterday and noted that I knew that we probably weren't as busy yesterday because there was a fast response vehicle on a recognised standby point on the front at Cleethorpes.
Thank you. Councillor Smith next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for the report. It made real interesting reading and it was nicely laid out, so it made it quite easy. And congratulations. There seem to be many improvements in the report, which is hard when we live in such a rural area. My question is about the professional support and learning. That was set up 5 years ago, and I was just wondering if it's still working as a good training programme, because obviously staff are working longer hours, they're hard push, and when they're on their downtime to then go on to do extra training in their own time. I was just wondering if that's still working. Thank you.
I'm just going to defer to colleagues. I think I would say yes.
Absolutely, it's still working. As we said in the report, it very much is over and above the statutory responsibility for training. It's extra, but we support staff to attend it by offering them working time towards it. So we don't pay them overtime, but they get what's classed as time off in lieu, toil, to attend professional support and learning hours. Equally, we have a whole team of clinical leadership across Lincolnshire that are there to support existing staff as well as new staff. And it's a regular occurrence that if someone's struggling with a particular type of incident or a particular type of attendance or a clinical subject, they'll very much be signposted into that. And where we want to be is getting to a position where, alluding to the data question or the data answer earlier, we're using intelligent data to be directing people. So a very simplistic example of that being, if I'm a frontline paramedic and I've not been to a maternity job in 6 months because it just hasn't happened, it will then intelligently provide that prompt of, it might be useful to go over as a loose example. But yes, very much still well received.
Thank you. Councillor Wimhurst next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say thank you for your report. It's very detailed. I was going to sort of echo what Councillor Reeves said regards to the 7-minute sort of SLA time to get to patients and things. It doesn't really suit the rural nature of our county, so I think you're all doing a really great job if you can get anywhere near that, you know, to be honest. Same with the handover times, that's got to be more dependent on the hospital, so, you know, there's not really much you can do there unless they can sort of clear people out in order to get people in, if you like. The question I've got, though, is on the controlled drugs digitalisation. So what metrics are we using there to sort of see the outcomes of it over previous methods of dispensing the drugs and things like that? And how will we see the results of that sort of over time? And also a second question, if I may, Chair. With regards to iPads, so I was just wondering how many of those we have. I mean, they're quite expensive devices. Have they got sort of, I would have thought they got cellular plans and everything else. What are the sort of tangible benefits of having everyone with an iPad over, say, a cheaper device, a laptop or something else? You know, thank you.
If I may, I'll do them in reverse order, and hopefully you'll remind me of the first question in a minute. The iPads, we've done an awful lot of work, and they're more like a tough book type iPad approach, and this is how the staff access medical information. They record an electronic patient report form, whereas it all used to be paper previously, and all of that is retained. So whilst it might seem an expensive outlay, there is a capital programme that gives us that refresh. And the staff, not only do they do that, they can look up toxicology base, they can look up a vast range of information, so they've got it at their fingertips in the patient's environment. And carrying a laptop is cumbersome, that, you know, if they haven't got that they wouldn't have the space to carry them. But these tough books have been, we actually procure them with staff input so that they can see what they're getting. So hopefully that answers that question.
It does, thank you.
Yeah. In relation to controlled drugs, we've moved basically from a paper system to an electronic system, and the speed at which we know if there is a discrepancy with our controlled drugs, because we do carry a lot. So obviously we need to have oversight of all of it, all of the time. So the electronic system gives us much more timely notification, because each time a vehicle goes out, the drugs are checked, they're checked when they come back. And again, through the iPad, it all goes through the system, so we know immediately if there is a discrepancy. So it's a much more efficient system.
Wonderful, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Cullen next, please.
I do apologise. Sorry, I do apologise. I'd like to talk about the detail you mentioned and summarised within Appendix C, and that's end-of-life care. Something I unfortunately have first-hand experience of. And as far as the respect forms are concerned, is there any way we can inform carers and families of people with respect forms that these are purely for information of the patient's wishes and not actually legally binding? Because at the moment of having to produce a respect form where the patient is at the end of their life. Just give an example, my son had DNR on his form, and within the moment of his passing, the last thing I wanted the ambulance crew to do was not try and save him. So I wasn't aware of it being not legally binding, as it were. And I actually had carried guilt for a long time afterwards of not, of asking them to try and save him instead of not. So if I wasn't aware of the fact that it's not legally binding, is there any way we can inform family and carers that they know, that they're aware, because in the end, all you try and do at the end is keep hold of the person, not. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I'm very sorry for the circumstances that you describe. Our frontline clinical staff come across this situation daily. We are not in a position, because we don't see the patients for the length of time required and have the knowledge to complete the forms ourselves. But we do talk to patients and families when we find ourselves in certain situations about what is best, and we take the best interest of the patient at the time. The lasting power of attorney is the legal element, health, but respect forms carry a lot of weight, and if they are compiled correctly with the right level of compassion, hopefully that information. So I think your question is, how can we help? So for us, what we do is we will work with primary care colleagues, with community care colleagues, particularly with end-of-life teams, to actually help support the families that we attend to get what they want in the future. So it's all about communication and that collaborative working.
That's all I'm asking for. But yeah, I just want to thank you and thank the staff of EMAS from the bottom of my heart for all the hard work you do. So Thank you very much.
That's very kind. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Watt next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose it's stating the obvious in some respects that one of the biggest barriers really to you being able to improve your responses is hospital capacity, and there's not very much that you can do about it from your standpoint. It's interesting what you say about the 7 minutes perhaps being unfair in your case, and an important point about you being able to have a positive impact after those 7 minutes, which I think is what you were saying. Just on recruitment, you mentioned that a lot of your staff are in the older demographic. Certainly actually concurs with my experience. If I think about it, a lot of those who I know in the service are could be described that way, I suppose. Is that a recent phenomena? Has that always been the case? And what are you doing to recruit younger people into it?
So if I could just go back to your original point about the hospitals, there is quite a bit that we can do to help, because it's the flow through the hospitals that helps our performance at what we call the front end. So we actually help support, and we work very closely with the non-emergency patient transport services with discharge, so that we get patients discharged in a timely way, so that it creates that flow. So there is an awful lot of work going on, because we do recognise the role that we have in that as well. So hopefully, and we also have introduced 45-minute handover, and the hospitals are working extremely well with us, so that we have a 45-minute cut-off point where we then leave the patients. We don't leave them in a corridor and we don't abandon them, but we leave them in the appropriate level of care, but the hospital recognise that after 45 minutes we need to go, particularly when we are holding a lot of calls in the community. So just to assure you, there's a lot more work going on, still a lot more to do. So that's that element. In terms of the workforce, we are gradually moving to a slightly less mature workforce, and I don't mean to be rude to anybody, because I've already said I'm in that category, well and truly, but there's a lot to be said for years of experience, so we value that, and we also we're proud of the way that we retain that skill set, even though frontline work might not be appropriate for somebody who for whatever reason is unable to do the physical side of the frontline work. So again, we've got a good track record with that. So we take students and newly qualified paramedics from a range of sources. We have a really good feed source from the military, believe it or not. They do a lot of work with us already, and when they leave the military, they often come to work for us, which is great. So we're reducing the age in some respects, but I think it's getting a mixture of experienced, mature, inexperienced younger people working together to actually strengthen your workforce. And now we have students training at Lincoln University, which is fabulous. So we're able to grow our own in Lincolnshire. We're also training and developing our unregistered staff. There is a career pathway, and we're just putting another tranche of staff, technical staff, on their paramedic training, 2/3 years training, that again, they can now receive in Lincolnshire. They don't have to go to Derby, they don't have to go to Nottingham or Northamptonshire. So we're working on the skill mix, but we're keen to retain the level of experience to help support the newly qualified, less experienced staff. I was a student nurse many years ago at the age of 18, extremely green. We are seeing people coming in at 18, 19 with very little life experience. So they need a lot of support. And through the professional support and learning and working with experienced mentors, hopefully they're getting that.
Thank you for the answer about recruitment. So if I may just ask a quick follow-up about the time, the 45-minute time. That sounds really interesting. Can I just ask, I suppose, the obvious points? Why is it 45 minutes? Could it not be sooner? Why would it not be later? Could we just clarify what the reason is for that?
Yeah, it's in recognition that previously the wait times have been quite a bit longer. So it's being realistic, and there is a view that the 45 minutes will reduce to 30 before too long. So we're working, as I've already said, on how we can improve that even further.
Thank you. I have Councillor Kendrick next, please.
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks for the presentation. In fact, it's answered a number of the questions that I had. I had about half a dozen questions. I was going to try and be very greedy, but I haven't got to answer. You'll be pleased to hear I haven't got to ask any of those very much. I was very interested to read about your comments on reward and recognition for staff, because clearly that's something very important. And am I right in thinking you're still doing the visits to stations around the county? That's my first question, because I know that in past presentations we've had, that's something that's been very useful, I think, from a management point of view. And the other thing I'd be interested to know was, obviously you must have the data on this, the percentage of cases you deal with relating to mental health, substance misuse and bariatric care, and also due diagnosis, of course, in case of mental health and substance misuse. Because I get a feeling, and I may be wrong, but you can correct me, of course, that there's an increasing pressure on both NHS services in hospitals, but also in A&E departments, but also for ambulance services in terms of call-outs on those sort of areas. Obviously, you have the data. I couldn't see it in the report. I apologise if I missed it, but I'm just wondering, maybe sometime we could have some stats on the pressures that you're undergoing due to these sort of issues. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, certainly. You haven't missed it. It's not in there. So, but certainly on a mental health side, as I've already alluded to, we have strengthened our mental health expertise and capacity. So, yes, we can provide those figures. In terms of bariatric patients, plus-size patients, we have a register that we keep because we undertake assessments of patients where we might need to do certain things a little bit differently in time-critical situations. So those patients are reassessed on an annual basis, and any crew that visit a patient that feel they might need an assessment, that then goes through a process. So again, we are very tuned into the needs of particular types of patients should they need us in more of an emergency. So.
And the visits, are you still doing the senior management visits?
We are. All of us are. Yes, we are. We wander about on a regular basis, unannounced, not for any particular reason, but, you know, if you announce that you're going to be on Scunthorpe Station at a particular time and you just don't get there for some reason, that can be a disappointment. So we have a very informal approach. Neil, in particular, is out and about. Wayne spends a lot of time in the north of the county. We do what we call our chatty cafes as well, where we take a vehicle with some tea and coffee and go and have informal conversations with our staff outside of emergency departments. No agenda, nothing from our point of view. It's just to hear from them how things are going, get suggestions. You know, if there are any grumbles, which I have to say, there are very few. We do find, and that's another reason I think the staff survey response is what we all might perceive as being quite low. I think if people had a lot to say, they would be filling that form in. But I think it might be the fact that they see us on a regular basis, so they can grab hold of Neil, they can grab hold of me, they can talk to us about anything. And that goes for our trade union colleagues as well, who we work really closely with.
That's great to hear, because I can think of a case a few years ago of a colleague telling me they never saw the chief executive in their particular trust in all the time they were there. So I think it's great to hear that. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Have Councillor Pessel next, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. First, my initial question is, whilst we've seen obvious benefits in the expansion of new technologies in things like the Lucas system, I do wonder whether there is complete optimization of new resources, particularly in things like IT and record keeping. Just from a personal anecdotal point of view, my father is currently in a palliative care situation and has been for quite some time, and yet when the paramedics were called to him due to it being an out of hours situation, there was no record of palliative situation or anything in his records, and it just concerns me that there are gaps in IT records and that sort of keeping, and whether you have all the resources that you need to integrate things like the use of AI to streamline record keeping, as well as the technological side of it. And just as a quick second question, I've tried to ask this question of the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner and didn't get anywhere, but are there any plans, or would you be open to the idea of running joint response patrols with Lincolnshire Police or similar police forces, as these joint patrols where you have a police officer and a highly skilled paramedic in fast response vehicles have been trialled elsewhere and seem to be quite successful in the services that they can bring to patients in stabilising both them and the situation around them.
That's a really interesting concept. Again, I'll take it in reverse order. So if you could supply us with examples of where that is a model, we'd certainly look into it. What I would say in terms of assurance, because both police and ambulance have a level of resource that is occupied for predominantly most of the time, we do work very closely with our call centres, and our senior colleagues in call centres liaise with police, ambulance and fire colleagues because they're joint in their call centre. So we are aware of situations that might need a dual or a tri-response very quickly. So whilst we might not have the same people in the same car, we do have the ability to mobilise and exchange information very quickly, so we all have a sharing of that. An example recently, it was the tragic fire out at Grimbleby, where all three emergency services worked extremely quickly and very well together. And we actually now, because we're co-located, particularly with fire colleagues and police colleagues in Lincoln, we work alongside, we train alongside. So we actually have a very much of an enhanced working relationship. So, but happy to hear anything offline that you may wish to share. So thank you. I'm going to bring Wayne in on the AI element, because that very much will be part of the work that he will be looking into with the trust. So, you know, instead of finger typing into the iPad, can we dictate accurately and successfully into a patient record system? And I know that that is being looked at as part of the trust. And there's also some other initiatives going on in the system to bring in AI in a satisfactory and a clinically acceptable way, because we do have to be very careful, obviously, with certain digital applications. But Wayne, I don't know whether you'd like to add anything else.
But I think you've covered the majority of the AI aspect, and I think it's about that risk and the clinical validation, really, to ensure that the AI is giving us exactly what it needs to do. And there are there are projects working forward now at a very early stage, and we also have a central AI team within EMAS just to give us that governance and oversight.
Thank you very much. If you could just quickly expand on whether you feel that there's an acceptable level of information being provided to you by GPs and other services so that you have access to complete records for situations such as end of life situations which may not warrant hospitalisation or be appropriate, so that you don't get into situations where you're called out and you have no idea what's going on, essentially, which is what the situation I found my father in the other day.
I can answer that point. So, in a very simplistic sense, do we have the IT to be able to see the records? Yes. So when we log on with our iPads and look at the GP shared care record, it's visible to us. I think, Councillor, what you're getting at is the issue of, but what if it's not visible to us? Now, that is something that we don't have absolute control over. It's one we can influence, we can discuss, communicate with various providers. But if the shared care record isn't visible to us, there's not a lot we can do with that. But we certainly have the technology and the ability to see it. Nationally, through the Department of Health and Social Care, there is a massive national project with regards to one shared health record, which I'm aware that the public are probably already of the thought process that, but can't you see everything anyway? But that is very much being worked on a national basis, as it's a problem that doesn't just affect Lincolnshire, it's a problem throughout the country. But we are as optimised as we can be that if it is visible to us, we can see it and use it and access it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick point to start with. It's kind of returning to something we just mentioned there about police co-response. The violence and aggression towards staff chart, the diagram you've got there, it's quite clear that your peaks there are during holiday times. It's very apparent, which I presume means it's alcohol related, is one of the main reasons you have problems with that. It also states that body cameras do reduce the risk. So surely it would make sense to make it pretty much compulsory to wear the body cameras during all peak holiday seasons. And also co-response with the police, even if it's just those holiday seasons, that would make some kind of sense, wouldn't it, if this is a particular issue in particular areas. So I was just looking at it and thinking, what kind of things you actually do? Are you actually doing anything specifically around holiday periods to try and bring that down? So that's the first question. The second one is, page 54 in here refers to the establishment of neighbourhood teams, populations of 50,000, etc., where you're going to incorporate paramedics into multidisciplinary groups. I'm presuming that's actually this neighbourhood health centres, if this is the same thing that we've been told about, where you have GPs, nurses, pharmacists. I was just wondering if you could sort of expand on this and give some more detail as to how you see this working. I'm slightly confused as to the link between what paramedics would be doing as inside what I presume is the neighbourhood health centre. Thank you.
So again, if I take that in reverse order, so there are already paramedics working in primary care as part of neighbourhood teams, and they work very successfully because they have a different skill set that they can enhance care with. In terms of what you're referring to in the paper from Trust Board, we're in the very early stages of looking at what that might look like. We have spoken to primary care colleagues in the past about what we called a rotational paramedic, so somebody that works so long for the ambulance service, then spends time in primary care and literally rotates through the two roles, picking up skills and also disseminating knowledge as well, because it gave, where we have trialled it, it has certainly enhanced the knowledge that primary care colleagues have of what we can and what we can't do. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities, but it's very early stages as yet. But rest assured, when the discussions really start to get going in Lincolnshire, we will be sitting around the table with everybody else. Yeah. So in terms of violence and aggression, we are not able to mandate use of body-worn cameras, unfortunately. What we do try to do, though, is to influence the use of them. So whilst colleagues might not wish to wear them all of the time, if they have them in their vehicles, so that when they arrive at a particular situation, they can attach them, turn them on. So that's where we are getting to, and that is being much more successful in terms of we're not taking a hard stick, but we're trying to demonstrate the influence that they could have by wearing a body-worn camera. And we've actually done, as part of the professional standards of learning, we've actually done a little podcast so that we can bust some myths about what body cameras may or may not be used for. Because obviously they've got a heightened awareness of certainly surveillance of that description. But we're also feeding back to staff when we have been able to successfully prosecute individuals. And it helps, I think, staff understand their role in trying to help the situation. You're right, there are some peaks in holiday period. It's not just alcohol, it's substance misuse across the board. And again, we do work and share intelligence, particularly with the police force in those situations. And we do have additional resources for peak holiday period. New Year's Eve used to be a prime example. It isn't anymore. But we know we always increase our staffing for areas of the year where we know we're going to need more people.
Thank you. I have Councillor McGee next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the benefit of waiting until other councillors have spoken is that you can get a real feel and link things together. So there's a few things that this is an excellent report and it celebrates your wins. And I really want to focus on one of the wins, which is your staff development. Many NHS trusts, due to having to increase their salaries for staff, therefore lost that money to be able to do staff development. And the fact that you focused on that is so important in terms of not demoralising staff. When you know that you have a career progression route, you stay invested in your role. So I just want to say well done for that. I think it's excellent. But I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't point out a few things. I think that I would like to have seen in this report, so that we can absolutely say, yes, these handover times are linked to hospital discharge. I think I would have really liked to have seen some hospital discharge figures go alongside it, so we as a committee can go, yes, that is the cause, that is something that's out of your control, and we then, because that benefits you, when they come to us at a later date, we can say, look, this is having a real knock-on effect on our ambulance service. So it's beneficial if we see that kind of information to verify it. I also would have liked to have seen category 1 figures in there, because whilst we all know we live in a rural county and that has an impact, if you are a patient and you have somebody in your home, a family member in your home having a heart attack, the public that are watching this want to know how long is it going to take for an ambulance to get there. And I think it's important that we have a look at that. And then I just want to link into some of the things that Councillor said. So Councillor Kendrick rightly raised issues with regards to patients with dual diagnosis, and that also feeds into what Councillor Martin raised with regards to violence and aggression. And we have in the past actually had a scheme in Lincolnshire, I believe, where LPFT and the police were out together, so that when people were in crisis, they were able to respond together because of the police's powers with regards to the Mental Health Act. So I do think it would be worth maybe speaking to LPFT colleagues to see how that worked historically. Funding was, of course, the issue of why that was reduced. So maybe looking to see where we've done similar in the past and successes. And the other thing I'd like to raise is that we can see that there are problems. So you've highlighted the fact that, for an excellent question from my colleague with regards to the fact that what doesn't work is audited by you guys. if we can see themes of what doesn't work, it may be that later a date this committee can ask relevant questions to other trusts and partners that help support you with that. So where there is learning, some of that coming back to us would be really helpful. So things like if we're going to have hear and see, or like actually somebody come in the home and say, yes, no, this isn't the appropriate pathway. When that's not going right, that would be great for us to be able to see that. And I think that's everything, but if I think of something else, I will come back to you. So yeah, just a little bit more detail about what's not going right would be really helpful. Oh, and one more thing. I need to say a personal thank you. For a year ago, I had sepsis and I was extremely unwell, extremely unwell. And your staff took me just a little bit out of area because of that issue with notes. So none of the hospitals in Lincolnshire would have had my notes. I needed to go to Bassett Law, which is 1 mile out of area. And your staff recognised how important it was that the staff at the hospital had immediate access to my surgical notes. And they took me where I needed to be, regardless of the fact it was 1 mile out of Lincolnshire. That is high standards, but it recognises we have a problem with notes. And I think us understanding how often that's impacting on patients would have been really helpful in the report. But otherwise, you guys are clearly doing an amazing job, so thank you.
I will respond. I've noted down what you've said. That's really helpful. So it is very difficult when you're compiling a report as to know when to stop. So we will take that all on board and we will include it in future reports. It would mean working very closely with other colleagues. So the discharge figures we would need to get from colleagues because we don't hold those. So again, but we could, there's nothing to stop us doing that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I have Councillor Mackinson Saunders. Sorry, Councillor McGee, you used to come back.
Thank you so much. And I'm really sorry, but I just wanted to back up what you said about paramedics in the neighbourhood teams. I used to sit on the neighbour. It's quite hard to understand how paramedics would be influencing primary care and to see that connection. But neighbourhood teams are a multidisciplinary team to work around people who have complex needs in the community. And when you think about it that way, you then understand that EMAS are the first people to often pick up that complexity. Somebody can be missed. And then when EMAS attends, they will be going, well, hang on a minute, there's somebody here who doesn't have a care package in place. They don't have this, they don't have that. And that then gets escalated to a neighbourhood team. So they have a fundamental role in primary care and how that operates in terms of the information that paramedics can provide. So I just wanted to back you up on that role. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackinson Saunders.
Talking about notes, that's one of the challenges I think we have on the east of the county, and I know you know it quite well. And basically, a lot of our patients who take up to Grimsby and stuff, and they don't come back. The notes don't come back because the system doesn't work. What are your challenges on the East Coast, and how can we help you with any of them? I'm sure you've got lots of challenges on the East Coast.
I think one of the challenges is just starting to build up with the start of Easter, because we do, as you know, expand numbers considerably.
Yeah.
But we don't physically take notes anywhere. We leave notes in people's homes where they have them. I think the access to people's individual records remains an issue. It's a system issue as well, as Neil has already described. But again, and I do know that particular clinical colleagues in the community services are really campaigning very hard and working with the ICB very closely on how we can turn this around and work more closely with our colleagues in primary care. So we don't physically take notes, but we are very much engaged in trying to have access, because Councillor McGee is absolutely right. Where we attend, sometimes you have to take a bit of a Miss Marple approach to what's going on, particularly if somebody is that unwell that they can't remember things or they're not particularly aware of what's going on. And there will usually be quite a complex medical history behind it. So it is really quite key for us.
Yeah, thank you. And the Middle East conflict is in everybody's minds at the moment. And I thought I'd give you the chance to reassure everybody that you would be able to have adequate fuel to get us all round if we're poorly.
Yes, we are able to assure we have a business continuity plan, not just for this, but for a wide range of elements that could impact our ability to respond. We keep a statutory amount of fuel available at stations across the division and indeed the region, as do all ambulance trusts. So we don't use that. We will fall back on it if we need to. We are given priority for delivery. And interestingly, there was a very kind phone call last week from a petrol station in the south of the county who said, we have reserved pump number 1 and number 7 if you need to come and get fuel from us. So, which was really kind, but we have our own arrangements. We are given priority and we do not have any concerns at this moment.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that will reassure an awful lot of people because there are a lot of worries about it.
Yes, of course.
And I just wanted to say, I tried to fill your form in to say thank you for the ambulance helping the people across the man across the road. And it was blooming difficult to fill in. And it almost wanted my inside leg measurement. And so I gave up in the end. And I felt really cross because they were so lovely and exemplary, really. And it was so nice to see that in action in the early hours in the morning. And I really felt strongly that I didn't want to fill in all these details about me and all the rest of it. It was complicated, I thought.
Okay, that's really helpful feedback. We'll take that back. Thank you. Thanks very much.
But if you could pass on our thanks.
Will do.
For an incident in Louth.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So everyone who's asked to speak has now spoken once. There's a couple of people who want to come back. Could I just ask, given the time, that you don't take too long, please? So Councillor Morgan and then Vice Chairman, please.
Thank you. I got beaten to the post the Iran question. We talked about fuel, but I understand that there could be potential other impacts on some supplies that you might require, not yet coming through. I'm just, have you, your contingency plan, does it cover everything, not just fuel? And also, whilst I appreciate you've got stocks, are you looking at your budget impacts from what's going on now? Because obviously at some stage you've got to replenish should you ever need to. Just wanted to ask you about that. What I can't see, I'm from Grantham, so we've got the urgent treatment centre there. What's your interaction experience regarding Grantham and how you support the urgent treatment centre or patients who might need transferring? Because I appreciate they can't deal with everything, and so you might get an emergency occurring there. I can't see any stats or anything relating to that. Forgive me if it's in here and I've missed it.
No, it's not in there. We do have particularly close working relationships with Grantham as it has transitioned. And indeed, one of the areas of work that Wayne is focusing on is making sure for any patients who do need onward transfer out of Grantham that haven't been taken in by us, then actually have the most appropriate transport platform to take them elsewhere, which may not always be a 999 ambulance. So it's just, again, making sure that we release those more experienced colleagues for the work that they need to do. So we are doing a lot of work with that, but we haven't included anything in there in this report. But I think this time next year, Wayne will, that's the work he's completing, or one of the pieces of work, so we'll have a lot more information on that. Because it's not just Grantham, it's Skegness, it's Gainsborough, it's Louth, UTCs as well. So it's right across the board. So, yeah. In terms of your other question around supplies, we have a vast range of business continuity plans to cover every eventuality that we can think of. Those are tested on a regular basis, and we have a regional as EMAS, we have a regional meeting. So strategic colleagues, so when I do my on-call, I'm on call for the whole of the region. So we have to have an oversight. We have a specific section on fleet and supplies where issues are flagged up. And indeed, there would be a financial contingency built into the plan every year should escalating costs arise. And we learnt a lot during COVID, and we've taken those lessons through our procurement team, who they'll be scanning, horizon scanning, for the particular elements that may be affected, not just by this conflict, but anything that would impact. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Reeve now, please.
Thank you. Just a quick question around body-worn cameras again. A couple of aspects. Is there some sort of resistance amongst staff to use them? Because I can't see why they wouldn't want to use them. And are they available to everybody? Is there a cost issue? And is the fact that they could be used to protect them from any sort of negligence or malpractice if there's actually a video recording of exactly what's gone on? Thank you.
Yeah, they're very good questions, thank you. So I can absolutely assure you that there is a body-worn camera for every single member of staff who's on duty on a daily basis, and it is a simple swipe card system to release them and to redock them so that they charge, because the film that they contain, should they be used, that's downloaded electronically. So there is no issue there. There has been some resistance from crews, a minority, I would say, because there's some concern about what it might be used for. And we have a specific policy that states exactly what it can and cannot be used for. So that was the idea behind the podcast that I mentioned, and the myth busting as to what it's actually used for. But there is a steadily increasing number of people actually using and taking body-worn cameras with them. And indeed, all of their managers, when we're out and about, they all wear body-worn cameras as part of that role modelling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I just have one question of my own in relation to, again, to data and access to records. Pardon me. It was said earlier that you have access to the National Patient Record System, but you can't always access it. Sorry, you can't always access particular records. Am I to infer from that that GPs allowing access to their particular set of records is patchy across Lincolnshire, that not all GPs make their data available to you through that system? That's the first question. The second one is in relation to the iPads records that are completed by your crews when they attend an incident. When they arrive at hospital, if it is a conveyance to hospital call out, is that immediately downloadable at the hospital onto their system? And if not, is that part of ULHT's programme for their computerised records in the future? Thank you.
So yes, I'm not an expert by any means on GP health records, but fundamentally what we are viewing is the records that have been released for us to view by that care provider. Now, for the majority of time, that is GP held. So, for example, a consultant letter is sent to a GP surgery, it gets uploaded to the GP system, we can see the consultant letter. So we're not viewing it through ULTH as to what the orthopaedic surgeon said, that's how we're seeing it. It's far more complex than that, but that's a very simplistic explanation. In terms of the iPad issue and our records, so when we are on scene with a patient and we start completing the record, when we hit the button that says, I'm conveying this person to Lincoln County, the moment it's got a destination, it's visible to Lincoln County clinical staff. So they can read it before we get there. So it's seamless in that sense.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Sorry, we have run slightly over time on this item, so we will now move this debate to a close. Thank you very, very much for your report. And I now move to a formal proposal, which is, one, that the presenters be thanked for their presentation on East Midlands Ambulance Service performance and for answering the committee's questions. Two, that the committee recognises the positive future plans the service has outlined to us today, but remains concerned about the ongoing problems of winter hospital handover times and data sharing. And 3, that the committee requests a further report from EMAS in a year's time. Does anyone wish to add anything to that proposal? If not, can I have a proposer, please, and a seconder? Proposed Councillor Mackinson-Saunders, seconded Councillor McGee. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? I think that's unanimous. No abstentions. Lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you again for attending and for the comprehensive nature of the report that you submitted to us. Thank you. We are now an hour and 25 minutes into the meeting. Would you wish to take a comfort break at this point? I apologise to the people that are waiting to present to us for overrunning. Or would you like to go straight to the next item? 10 minutes. Sorry? I think it'll be another. I think we're going to be another hour, aren't we? At least. So, if you'd like a comfort break, 10-minute break. Apologies for keeping you waiting. If we can recommence the meeting now. Thank you, everyone. Again, apologies for keeping you waiting. The next item on the agenda is item 6, which is Community Pharmacy Services in Lincolnshire. This was circulated as part of the agenda pack on pages 107 to 132. This item considers a two-part report on community pharmacy provision in Lincolnshire. Appendix A contains a report from Community Pharmacy Lincolnshire, and Appendix B contains a report from Lincolnshire Integrated Care Board. Our presenters today, who are here in the chamber in person, from Community Pharmacy Lincolnshire, we have Dr. Tracy Latham-Green, Chief Officer of CPL, and Paul Jenks, Chair of CPL. Welcome. And our presenters from the NHS ICB are Shazia Patel, Assistant Pharmacy Director, and Vanessa Hales, NHS Lincolnshire ICB. Welcome to you too. So, Dr. Latham-Green and Mr. Jenks, would you like to present your report, please, first?
Of course, and thank you for the opportunity. So we kindly ask the committee to note the content of the report, but to keep things brief, I'd like to pick out some key points for us. As you can see in the report, there are some real challenges to the stability of the community pharmacy network across England that relate to national levels of funding. And these are playing out in some quite significant ways. So we've seen the number of community pharmacies across England reduce over the last few years. We've seen the collapse of the second largest multiple chain, Lloyd's Pharmacy, and that has had consequences across the systems. And we've also seen challenges within Lincolnshire's borders where we have pharmacies consolidating. So that's where two pharmacies essentially merge into a single unit because of cost efficiencies. And it's important perhaps to note from the committee that within our report we've stated from Community Pharmacy Lincolnshire there are 112 community pharmacies, bricks and mortar pharmacies. Since we wrote that report, the number is now 109. So we are seeing that change because of the cost impacts. We'll hope that members have noted that from the report, national organisations have identified potentially that 63% of pharmacies are at risk of closure within a year, and long term, almost 100%, so 99% of community pharmacies are unsustainable. And this comes down to the shortfall in funding which the NHS has identified through its own economic analysis of £2 billion shortage. So that equates to approximately £200,000 shortfall per year for pharmacies. And community pharmacies only receive funding from the NHS for the services they provide, so for items they dispense or clinical services that they offer. There is no capital funding, no establishment payments, they were all phased out. So that means that pharmacies are having to dip into their own pockets to pay staff wages, to pay electricity bills, to keep the lights on is a phrase we're often using. So it is a really challenging environment at the moment. And unfortunately that's leading to some other challenges. Medicine shortages are also playing a great part in the difficulties community pharmacies are facing, and we know that community pharmacies have reported spending 2 to 3 hours a day looking to source medicines because of the national and global shortages of some of the items. And indeed we've noticed that the House of Lords have identified medicine security as a key national priority. This is because a significant proportion of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, the bits that keep us well, that make us better within medicines, aren't manufactured or sourced from within the UK or even the European Union. Many of those are sourced from places like India and China, and with the current global political state, it means that there are difficulties sometimes in sourcing medicines. That, combined with the NHS low price driver, means that we're a less palatable market for global suppliers of medicines. So there are some significant challenges. Indeed, there is a system that supports community pharmacies with access to medicines at an appropriate price. So pharmacies are reimbursed by a set price by the NHS for the medicines they provide, and therefore need to purchase medicines at or just below that price to be able to stay viable. The system is called no cheaper stock obtainable, which means if a pharmacy would normally be reimbursed £1 for a particular medicine, but they can only buy that at £4, for a temporary period they may be reimbursed that £4. That was a temporary setup, and it was designed for occasional shortfalls in medicines. So historically, when it was first introduced, you may see 2 or 3, perhaps pretty uncommon medicines hit that list, which wasn't an issue. I checked this morning, there are 197 medicines on that list, which means those are medicines that pharmacies are unable to supply at the standard price which the NHS is paying, and are having to pay sometimes £6 or £7 more per box, often more, to be able to attain them. And that money comes out of the pharmacy contractor's pocket. They're having to pay that money themselves. So it's a perfect storm of challenge, and what that does lead to, and something we haven't referenced in our report because the information only came out last week, was a survey from community pharmacy contractors in which almost 6,000 contractors took part around violence and aggression in community pharmacies. About half of those report they have verbal abuse on a regular basis. 3/4 have some form of abuse at least once a week, and 1 in 5 pharmacies are reporting abuse on a daily basis. This abuse ranges from swearing and aggressive behaviour right through to physical violence, where we've had reports of items being thrown, spitting, and in some cases strangulation, where pharmacy members of staff have been grabbed by the throat. And these are places that we want to remain accessible. They are the first port of call for many people within healthcare, within our communities and our systems. We want to make sure that people can walk in and get the advice they need. They can obtain medicines without having to go through screens and barriers. We heard our colleagues earlier from the ambulance service talking about body cams, and we have some pharmacies that use body cams, but they're a barrier to care. If I'm providing care to a young lady who's accessing emergency contraception, they certainly don't want to be in a consultation room talking about their sexual history with me with a body cam. So we want to try and encourage reduction in that aggressive behaviour by the public. But the perfect storm and the challenges this creates is one of the factors that's influencing that. However, within this really challenging and difficult environment, community pharmacies are providing increased levels of services which help patients access the care they need within their communities, mostly without appointments. This includes hypertension case finding, which allows community pharmacies to check people's blood pressure and potentially identify those patients who are at risk of heart attacks, strokes, and other unpleasant incidents by early identification of that high blood pressure and refer into into GP practice from community pharmacy where that's identified. Lincolnshire does really well with this, so there are 2 stages of that process. One is an initial clinical check within the community pharmacy, which is opportunistic. And if that clinic check identifies potentially high blood pressure, the patient is then offered a significant period of monitoring. So we give them an ambulatory blood pressure monitor, which they wear for periods of 16 to 24 hours, which takes readings and gives a really good clinical picture that helps to identify where high blood pressure might be a risk, and therefore a much more educated referral into general practice. Lincolnshire pharmacies do particularly well in converting patients from those clinic blood pressure monitors into that ongoing sustained monitoring, because it can be a difficult conversation. Not many people want to wear a blood pressure monitor for 24 hours, but we do incredibly well in Lincolnshire. We also offer Pharmacy First, and we've talked about this previously, where as well as taking referrals from general practice and from urgent care, we can offer clinical pathways to patients who walk in with 7 common clinical conditions. These are patients that may have presented at urgent care and therefore taken up an appointment slot, or made an appointment with their general practice where they could have been seen and managed effectively within a community pharmacy setting, using the skills of the pharmacy and the pharmacist and the pharmacy team. We've also seen expansion of the community pharmacy contraception service, where pharmacies can initiate and provide ongoing oral contraception to women who require this without the need for an appointment from their GP. In October, we saw the introduction of a nationwide emergency contraception service, which now allows anyone above the age of 13 to go into a pharmacy and have access to emergency contraception. Historically, this has been a locally commissioned service with some quite significant age restrictions, and actually it's been very piecemeal. Now we have a situation where almost all pharmacies, with one exception in Lincolnshire, offer that service. So the accessibility to women for their sexual health and their health and well-being is significantly expanded. So whilst we ask for significant acknowledgement of the challenges community pharmacy places, we also would like the committee to acknowledge the fact that they are still continuing to provide incredible care in communities and the settings in which they're working. Thank you.
Thank you. Our presenters, sorry, beg your pardon, Shashia Patel and Diane Wells, would you like to do your presentation now, please? Thank you.
Thank you. So I will take the paper as being read. This is, again, an update to the committee for a paper that came previously in December 2024. And this is more from the Integrated Care Board perspective on the same topics. So just to note that as an organisation, due to the wide-ranging reforms the government have imposed on ICBs and the NHS, Lincoln, Derby and Nottingham ICBs will be what's called clustering. So they remain 3 separate legal entities but working closer together. So that's going through a period of change at the moment. Recruitment issues in community pharmacy remain a challenge locally due to the rurality and the remote nature of the county, but there is work that has been ongoing with the pharmacy faculty to increase things like cross-sector placements, which make the increase the attraction to our workforce, but also funding for training for pharmacy technicians as well. In relation to Pharmacy First, the ICB work with system partners to raise the awareness and work to increase referrals and other initiatives. Following on from the Health Watch report in 2024, where it was identified that there remains low public awareness of Pharmacy First, there's been a significant amount of social media campaigns, but also work across school, colleges and universities to raise awareness. And that has resulted in an increase in the level of activity, as the report will state. Furthermore, on the issue around medicines shortages, whilst a lot of this is out of our control, there have been, we do respond with a number of local initiatives. So Paul mentioned that the national work going on around this has resulted in the House of Commons, House of Lords producing a report called the Medicines Security, a National Priority. So as we've mentioned, quite a lot is out of our control. However, on the receipt of medicine supply notifications as a system, either within Lincolnshire or across the clusters, we will convene as necessary the relevant stakeholders to understand and identify any local actions that need to be taken. A recent example of this was around cocodamol, and this gave an opportunity to then review the patients that are taking cocodamol long term and implement some plans, and that's done with local experts, stakeholders, and goes through our internal governance processes. Similarly, our GPs have a point of prescribing software called Optimize. So when we are alerted of supply shortages, we can implement messages on Optimize that will, so when the prescribing is taking place, it will pop up, there's a pop-up message and it will say, this item is in short supply. This is the alternative. So there are some mechanisms around that, and there have also been other initiatives that the ICB have taken. In furthermore to that, from a community pharmacy point of view, we have 5 sites that are being called independent prescribing Pathfinder sites, and this is part of the National Pathfinder programme that NHS England launched about 2.5 years ago. And this is to allow a framework to be developed for commissioning of prescribing services in community pharmacy. So the programme ended at the end of December 2025, and there it's been nationally evaluated, and it sets out the governance and has led to the development of a commissioning framework, which is yet to be published from NHS England, but it will allow local systems to commission more prescribing services from community pharmacies, so expanding that role. As part of the Pathfinder programme, all systems were asked to develop and propose a number of clinical models, and one of those was around, in Lincolnshire, medicine shortages. So it allowed we have 5 sites in Lincolnshire, so it allows the prescriber to change the medication based on prescribing something that is alternative and is available. And that's been a real benefit to supporting the medicine supply issue for Lincolnshire. Furthermore, some local other activity has been around, not just for Lincoln, but an East Midlands development of a community pharmacy strategy. The purpose of the strategy is to provide an overarching strategic leadership approach to how we and raise the profile of what community pharmacy does and how we can embed community pharmacy as a acknowledged and recognised pillar of primary care to increase and support addressing public health and population health needs, addressing inequalities, and local commissioning to reach underserved populations, and how we utilise that sector better. That was the purpose of the strategy. It sets it out clearly in terms of 5 chapters for one around digital, one around workforce, one for research and innovation, and one for public health, and one for health inequalities. The development of plans to implement the strategy will very much align to how the development of integrated neighbourhood teams, and that's the kind of space that it will sit, but we work on that from a strategic point of view. So those are kind of like, I guess, the highlights from the report. Happy to take any questions from committee.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Smith to speak first, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions, if that's all right. Thank you. Thank you for this report. It does make for rather sad reading, and it brings to mind a bit of the chicken and egg situation, as we've been informed that we have to use pharmacies more to relieve GPs, and yet the pharmacies are now closing. So with all the extra cost pressures and the overheads that the pharmacies have, is there any way that they could be maybe moved into established more village town shops, so that then they've got the overheads covered, if that was a way forward? And the second question I have is about the tablet and drug wastage. My husband went into hospital 3 times last year in Lincoln, and he was given a massive bag of drugs that we informed them that we already had at home and we didn't need, but because they were on the GP list, he could not be discharged unless he was given this bag load of drugs. And then when he passed away in August, I landed up taking a massive sack load, huge bin bag to boot, of unopened, in-date drugs that they then informed me would have to be disposed of and put in the bin, which seems complete and utter madness and wastage when we are so short of drugs. Thank you.
I'm happy to take those. So I think in terms of moving community pharmacies, part of the challenges pharmacies often have is they're tied into long leases in the premises in which they are, and those premises are fitted out to support some of the service delivery. So with those private consultation rooms, many of which were fitted in 2005 when we saw a change to the contract and were designed for conversation rather than clinical examination. There is no investment or no funding available for community pharmacies to continue to develop their premises. All of the cost of a pharmacy refitting its premises, building second consultation rooms, is borne by that pharmacy out of its income. And the cost, as any costs, of making those refits and those changes is increasing. I've heard horrific quotes of pharmacies who've been quoted £100,000 to put in a second consultation room in their premises. And you could build a bungalow for that. So it's a challenge. And I think what we're seeing is consolidation, which I referred to earlier, where we may have two pharmacies within really short walking distance of each other that essentially merge into a single pharmacy, and that is reducing some of the overheads without compromising the care they can provide to patients. However, it does mean that patients may not necessarily have a pharmacy on their doorstep that they had previously. With the second point regarding medicines wastage, it's been an ongoing conversation for as long as I've been a pharmacist, which is almost 30 years. Part of the challenge we have is while many patients will store their medicines safely at home and they're in sealed boxes, we can't be sure that all medicines that are returned to a pharmacy have been stored in that same way. They may have been stored outside of the temperature ranges, or worse still, may have been tampered with. And therefore the risk for the general population is just too great to reuse those medicines. In Lincolnshire, we do very well with managing some of those elements of medicines wastage by fundamentally using 28-day prescribing. So whilst it feels frustrating for patients, and I'm one of them, to have to reorder my medicines every 4 weeks, what it does mean is that if my medicine's changed, actually it's a minimum wastage rather than if I had a 2-month prescription or a 3-month prescription. And the majority of practices across Lincolnshire work very tightly to that 28-day prescribing, which does as much as we can as a system to reduce wastage.
I'll just come back. Yeah, it's the hospital, though, insisting that they're discharged with prescriptions that we informed them we didn't need or want, but they insisted because it was on the GP record that they had to be given out, that it needs to be better coordination between the GP practice and the hospital to say, no, they don't need to have these prescriptions.
And as a community pharmacist, I'm speaking on behalf of my hospital colleagues. Some of this is part of their policy to make sure that when patients are discharged, they have the medicines they need. And it's almost a blanket policy to ensure that we reduce the risks. There are opportunities to improve things, and we're working again closely with ICB colleagues to look at how we can support patients better once they're discharged from hospital. There is a national service that's an essential service that every community pharmacy must provide called the Discharge Medicine Service, which means when patients are discharged from hospital, there are conversations that they have with the pharmacy team about what medicines they already have, whether they're clinically the correct ones they still need, support for ongoing medicine. So it's a 3-stage process, and we've been a little behind in Lincolnshire because of some challenges from ULTH around implementation of their electronic systems in getting that up and running, but we have robust plans together now to look at how we can make that better and start to roll that out much more significantly across the county.
Thank you. Councillor Pessell next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 2 quick questions. Firstly, in regard to, sorry, mind blank slightly. In regard to the issue of medication supplies, is this the primary driver why often there's quite a bit of variation in the actual maker and supplier of medications that can vary even though a prescription is continual? I have repeat prescription orders that constitute shipping orders and will very rarely get the same producer of the same medication from month to month. is this the primary reason? Secondly, in regard to one of the things I was unfortunate not to see in the document was any mention of mitigation or details of how the reduction in harm in prescription mistakes. I know that the PINSA programme is going on at the moment in some areas to try and mitigate mistakes that are made in prescriptions. Would it be possible to get any sort of information on that in specific regard to Lincolnshire, and any statistics that can be generated from that?
Thank you. Happy to take that. Again, as colleagues have done before, I'll take the second part first. With regards to data around mitigation for errors regarding to prescriptions, we simply don't have that data at the moment. There is ongoing work to shift to a national reporting and learning system where pharmacies will identify errors and near misses, and that data will start to filter down, but it's only been in the last 7 or 8 months where that's been mandatory. Before that, pharmacies have had their own systems where they have reported through the previous national system, but that was consolidated data. So we should see clearer pictures. What I can reassure attendees of is that pharmacies are investing, again, their own money in significant improvements in technology, which is improving the safety even further of the dispensing and supply process. There are many pharmacy system providers now that will integrate elements of barcode scanning and all of those things that help to support the accuracy and improvements within that supply process. There's still a human element, so there is still a role for a pharmacist to identify where there may have been a prescribing error, so where the person issuing the prescription may have made a mistake, selected the wrong thing, or it may not be quite clinically appropriate, because we're all people, we're all humans. And there is human error in picking the wrong box and those kind of things. And that does link me to your first point around different brands and different manufacturers being supplied under an ongoing monthly basis. And that is an issue, as you raised, around the price. Sometimes it's simply that we cannot get the brand you had last month, this month, because it's not available from the manufacturer. Sometimes it's around cost, in that as pharmacies are financially challenged, they're needing to look at which brand they can manage within their finances, and some brands are slightly cheaper. It may be a penny a box difference, but actually over the scale of things that can be significant and can mean they can pay their wholesaler bill at the end of the month. So we are seeing some of those real difficulties. Pharmacy contractors want to continue with ongoing provision of the same brands. It makes our life easier, and it improves things like patient safety. If your system needs to recognise 15 different barcodes for one particular drug, that's much more complex and increases risk than if you've got one consistent brand you're using all of the time. So there's, again, lots of things happening, lots of moving parts, where pharmacies are doing the absolute best they can to make sure patients continue to get the supply. And it unfortunately does mean that you might find that one month your tablets are blue and the next month the same tablet is white. And it can be really difficult for patients to manage. It's equally as frustrating for us as pharmacies making those challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Mackinson-Saunders next, please.
Well, I feel really sympathetic, and I don't want to be critical, because I think you've got a really rotten, it's really rotten what's going on, and it's about to all evaporate and fall to pieces, isn't it, if we're not careful. Because I was going to be critical of Pharmacy First, actually, because I thought, because I come here and listen to these presentations, I thought I'll go and try it out. And I went to one of the Boots branches, and the pharmacist there took me through this questionnaire, and I got sinusitis. And he said, "Oh, you haven't got enough points." I said, "What do you mean I haven't got enough points?" So he explained to me I had to have, I think it was 11 points on his tick list. So he said, "But if you come back next week on Monday, we'll try again. So I returned the following Monday, and it was a locum pharmacist who had never used the Boots system before and had no clue whatsoever what she was doing. And I said, perhaps it's just better if I went. I won't bother. I'll just take, I don't know, Sudafed or something. And the system just didn't work. And I just thought, from personal experience, I felt quite critical of it. And I just wanted to tell you that sometimes it just doesn't work. But I run a baby bank. Somebody came in the other week. The child had got tonsillitis. And I said, go down to Boots, go to the pharmacy. And they were dealt with, didn't have to go to the doctors. And the child was dealt with immediately. So it's horses for courses, isn't it? But I do feel sorry for you. I listened to the ICB and I just think that sounds frightfully, well, you're doing a job and your job is very different. And the empathy between the two didn't really come over quite as I would have liked it to have done. And I understand you've all got different roles, but I do feel sorry for you. And we can't keep losing pharmacists, especially in a rural county. So I'm really sorry for you.
No, thank you. And please be reassured, we do work incredibly closely with our ICB colleagues across the East Midlands. We're really proud in Lincolnshire that we've probably some of the strongest relationships with our ICB partners, including other colleagues in primary care, with our optometry colleagues, with general practice and with dentistry. We've got a really strong working relationship that looks to serve the population of the county. With regards to Pharmacy First, I'm sorry you had that challenging experience, shall we say. It is quite a restrictive service, so in order to provide it, it is very black and white. You have to meet certain criteria for us to be able to supply medicines, and that can feel really difficult as a patient, particularly with sinusitis, where the wait period is quite a long time, because if you're in discomfort, waiting 10 days before you can have any form of treatment can feel really unpleasant. But they're based on national clinical guidelines, so they should be applied in the same way as if you went to your general practice. So they are really positive. Unfortunately, we do have some people with any system, whether it's GP, nurse, who perhaps aren't as suitably trained, shall we say, as they need to be. And that may be due to their experience, due to where they've come from and their history. But we are really clear that the majority of Pharmacy First provisions in Lincolnshire go down really well. I know I'm working in pharmacy in Mablethorpe on Saturday, and I'm going to be very busy with Pharmacy First because it's Easter Saturday. And I will do several consultations, and some of those I'll be able to help. Some of them it may be I need to refer elsewhere. That's the nature of the way the service has been set up. But there are ongoing conversations nationally to look at what else can Pharmacy First do. Shazia mentioned the Pathfinder sites for independent prescribing pharmacies, and one of the things is actually how do we link those prescribing pharmacists to the provision of things like Pharmacy First, where a prescriber would have perhaps less restriction and may be able to flex where it's more appropriate. As a pharmacist who's not a prescriber, I have to follow those black and white regulations when providing Pharmacy First. But I thank you for your empathy.
Thank you. Councillor McGee, please.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to say that this report and all of the supporting documentation was really helpful in painting a picture in how the UK finds itself in a particular storm of a scenario. So obviously the impact of Brexit, so we now have 2 regulatory frameworks. That causes a massive issue in terms of investment, and I can see you nodding, Paul, because you know. If you were going to invest as a pharmaceutical company in the UK and you had access to a smaller market, you had the NHS driving prices down, and you also had an additional regulatory framework to work with, that absolutely reduces the likelihood of you investing in the UK. And we've seen that AstraZeneca pulled out of a massive deal, as did several pharmaceutical companies, and Brexit has had a huge impact. It also looked at the global situation in terms of just-in-time production. So all of the companies producing medicines and the component parts are working on that just in time so that we reduce the sort of costs that they're working with. And so that's having an impact too. It really looked at the social media effect. It talked about the Davina effect in terms of HRT and social media in terms of people looking for ADHD diagnoses. So it was really broad, and that was really helpful for me to understand how we're in the scenario that we're in. So I've got 4 questions, if that's okay. So the first one is, in the last 24 hours, we've had 2 major newspapers producing articles saying that due to Iran, particularly with regards to India and the fact that they make the parts that make our medicines, and their issues with fuel supplies, that NHS chiefs are saying that the UK is on the verge of running out of some medicines. So can I have assurances of what position Lincolnshire finds itself in with regards to that? I've got a lower level question in terms of contraception. So I've had a number of people say to me that they have been prescribed contraceptions by consultants for conditions like endometriosis, and that was then put back to their GP to continue that ongoing monitoring and that contraception provision. But then the GPs have gone out of their way to push them to get their contraceptives from the pharmacists and not the GPs. And that they are very concerned about the ongoing monitoring, which is not the role of a pharmacist, but a GP. So can we have some clarity on who should be doing that, please? The last time you guys were here, there was a report that highlighted accessing patient data could be a problem. Are we mitigating that if we're having prescribing pharmacists so that we don't potentially have people being prescribed things that they shouldn't be prescribed because of their underlying health conditions? And the last one is, we know that we've got the community pharmacy contractual framework is being negotiated, and it should have been completed today, and it hasn't been, and that would absolutely mitigate if you guys were to get some more money from government. Do we have a time scale from when those negotiations are going to be completed? Are you hearing anything about how far along we are? Thank you very much.
I'll take your first one around medicine supply, and then I'll hand over to Paul. So in relation to your question, can we absolutely assure that we're not going to be affected in Lincolnshire? Unfortunately, we are unclear as to what the position will be around medicine shortages. We do know that nationally, Department of Health have an emergency preparedness and a team dedicated to medicine supply concerns, and we will respond to the information that we receive, but we are unclear which medicines will be impacted at this point. But we do have processes in place to work closely with stakeholders to mitigate with alternatives and plans and what that looks like. And a lot of that may well be directed nationally. There is a specialist pharmacy service, which is a national organisations that's commissioned by the NHS that work closely and to produce guidance that is then disseminated to ICBs, to community pharmacies, to GP practices. So there is a kind of system approach to that, but we are unclear what the impact will be. And I am aware of the news reports in the last 24 hours. So I'm sorry I can't give more clearer details than that. I'll hand over to Paul. Sorry, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, just to reiterate, we're not in a situation where those kind of emergency contingency plans are being put in place yet then. That's not happening, because obviously when the public reads those kind of headlines, the panic is, am I going to be able to get my medication? So just assurances that we're not there yet in Lincolnshire would be helpful.
There are always business continuity type plans that all systems and community pharmacies will have. What we don't want to happen is that people are then over ordering, and then it causes an unintended consequence to supply in other parts. So we kind of have a kind of steady, mitigated response to this sort of situation.
Thank you. And just to add to that, we're very fortunate in our colleagues in general practice have really robust processes in place to reduce the risk of over-ordering. So whilst there may be questions and conversations from patients around the news reports, the systems are in place to stop hoarding and reduce some of those challenges, at least in the short term. Thank you. So if I could take your other points now, one was around contraception service in community pharmacy. The service specification is very clear that we can provide contraception for contraceptive purposes only. So where it is used for other things like management of heavy bleeds, endometriosis, in some cases acne, they should be managed through their general practice. So in that scenario, it's well-meaning intent, where actually we know pharmacies can provide contraception, go to your pharmacy, then unfortunately we will end up with those patients bounded around. And we're working together with the ICB to improve the understanding of pharmacy services and how they work with general practice and with sexual health services. So it's all around growing knowledge, and so we understand who can be referred, and for the majority of people, the community pharmacy is probably the most appropriate place for them to get that service, because they can walk in, they don't have to have an appointment in most cases. But there will be patients that will still need to be managed through their general practice, because it's for both contraceptive and perhaps other conditions that they're using those medicines. And forgive me, I can't remember the other question you asked. Thank you.
Accessing patient data, risks around prescribers.
Accessing patient data around prescribing. Part of the challenge that we've had with the Pathfinder, and it was called Pathfinder to identify some of these difficulties and the potential solutions to them, was recognising that pharmacies work in very different systems to the NHS. Where we've seen real success, it is where the pharmacy has access to System 1, the same system the GP uses, so they can see the same details, and therefore their prescribing is absolutely based on the patient's clinical and medical history in the right way. So it is definitely the approach of how do we make that happen as we roll out prescribing services. At the moment, community pharmacies have access to the summary care record, which does give you a lot of information about patients' care. The challenge we do have is when summary care records were set up, so it's now the National Healthcare Record Service, some patients chose to opt out, about 4% of the population. So I have been in situations where I've been looking to provide care to a patient, and it simply says this patient doesn't have a summary care record. At the moment, that means I can go no further with the care I can provide. But as we move to increased access to different levels of that healthcare record, we'll see the care improve through community pharmacy settings. So it's ongoing work at a national level based on some of the Pathfinder work within independent prescribing.
CPCF
yes.
negotiations.
And CPCF negotiations, that did make me smile. So conscious that I'm being recorded, your guess is as good as ours, I think is the best one. It is an ongoing negotiation and discussion with NHS England, and therefore we can probably expect something maybe June, which is very difficult for pharmacy contractors because they'll be working 3 months not knowing how much they're being paid. But it's a situation we've been in before.
Thank you so much for those answers. They're really appreciated. I would just stress, obviously, there's a feedback from Gainsborough patients because that's the area that I represent, and perhaps there's some work that needs to be done with the GP practices there, whether or not that's ICB's responsibility or not, but to go back and explain that actually contraception for certain conditions, it's essential that that's monitored by a GP and not passed on to a pharmacist. It's unfair on the pharmacist and the patient. It's not safe. My next question is, if we're talking about clinical systems and there's a move towards pharmacists being able to prescribe, which I wholeheartedly support, I think anything that takes pressure off, but that has to be done safely. So is the role for funding, because it isn't just System 1 that GP practices use, there's actually other, we know that it's like a kaleidoscope of systems. So is there work from the ICB or others? Is it part of the negotiations with regards to contract to be able to work? Because it is part of the NHS plan for pharmacists to be doing this work. Where is the funding coming from for that digital revolution is what you're talking about? Because I would be one of those patients who opted out. So you would be like flying in the dark with me. So is there work ongoing either from the ICB or at a national level to support pharmacists to be able to hit the NHS's ambitions?
So thank you for your question. And the national evaluation identified a number of areas that need to be addressed, and one of them is around digital interoperability. So while community pharmacies work as independent businesses, there is the need that we link in the necessary digital systems. There is a growth as well of the digital solutions on offer. So it's kind of, there are two national parts of that work within NHS. One is the digital transformation team at NHS England, and the other is the pharmacy integration team work. And both the I guess the roadmap for that as an enabler align with each other. That's sort of like a part of how they're working, and as part of how we work locally and across the cluster is so Pathfinder, all of our sites had access to something called GP Connect Read function, which is above and beyond the standard shared care, the summary care record. It allows the an integration into the pharmacy system, which is the prescribing system called Clio, to allow the pharmacist to view the patient records. So that was regardless of them having System 1 or not. I know that gives you greater functionality and a right function as well. But all of that is things that we need to consider, which is part of our learnings as well, in terms of also rolling it out, expanding it, what are the governance, the safety, the digital, the interoperability. And we're also aware that there's a lot of work going on nationally and regionally around digital medicines pathways, and ensuring that there is more clinical leadership in that space to understand the impact of those systems. All of that's ongoing. So we keep in tuned and linked into those work streams.
Okay, thank you. And the next speaker is Councillor Scalesi, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a healthcare professional, I do medication 2 or 3 times a day. We've got 3 clients that are on liquid medication because they can't take tablet form, really struggling to get liquid medication, particularly ramipril, propranolol, metformin, atorvastatin. Even if, like with ramipril, we have a 30-day refrigeration life on that, so we really have to put the prescription in when we pick the other one up, and we've been told that we can't do that. And then we obviously get to a position where the client's nearly at running out stage. What do we do?
Thank you, Councillor. This is a real challenge. Part of the issues is the active pharmaceutical ingredients for those things, particularly ramipril, are the problem. So many of the liquid medicines, there are manufacturers who routinely make those, but they make them in small batches. Demand is much lower, and therefore they tend to be at the forefront and the pinch points of any shortages. Some of those are made as special medicines, which means they're made to order because of the limited shelf life they have. And again, if they can't source the raw ingredients, ramipril and metformin and propranolol are all ones that are on the shortage list for some of those at the moment. That becomes a real pinch point. There isn't an easy solution. Some of it may be around reassessing the patient's swallow and whether their ability to swallow medicines is different options. In some cases that may be appropriate, in others it's absolutely not going to be. But it's fundamentally around looking at what we can do collectively to mitigate some of those shortages. And unfortunately, in many cases, there isn't a really easy answer, I'm afraid.
We've also got I've got 3 ladies that are on HRT gel, the pump. Can't get it at all now.
HRT gel is another one. That's probably one of those where it's the global storm of things like, as was mentioned, the Davina effect. It is an incredibly positive move that we have more people now talking about menopause and seeking support with menopausal symptoms. But what that does do is place an increased demand on the supplies and stocks that are available. We've seen it with other medicines recently, so ADHD medicines, we saw a significant global shortage about 18 months to 2 years ago, and that was caused by a significant increase in an updial in adults seeking support with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, combined with the restrictions on supply that are caused by all of the other things we've talked about. So it is this perfect challenge of people taking more ownership of their health and well-being, which is a really positive thing, and absolutely I think all healthcare professionals would encourage, but it does place increased demands on what can be limited resources across a system, and a system that's not geared up globally to dial up production overnight. It takes a little bit of time, and it is causing problems. The challenge we face then is as community pharmacists and our teams, we're at the forefront of, I can't supply this for you today, and that leads to abuse and aggression. And it's certainly not for want of trying.
On the positive for you, we've got fantastic Pharmacy First in Knight Street, Pinchbeck, and also West Ellow, Spalding. They do a remarkable job there.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Reeve next.
Thank you. In terms of improving accessibility for people to come and collect prescriptions and the likes, a couple of years ago, I think it was Spalding, I'm not sure if it's either a doctor's surgery or a pharmacy, and there was a vending machine, which I had not seen before, where the patient had got a barcode on their phone from the doctor, and they just presented the barcode in the vending machine, popped the medicine out, and whilst I appreciate that would be an even bigger financial investment for the pharmacy, perhaps at a time when they can't really afford it, is it the sort of thing that's encouraged? I don't know what sort of price. Look, if you're looking at 100,000 for a cubicle, you probably look at £1 million for a vending machine. But it's not something that I see has been rolled out at all. I don't know how successful they are or anything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Reeve. Happy to take that. There are opportunities, and we do see some pharmacy contractors and indeed dispensing GPs looking at those as a model. They're tied up in some quite complex legislation, as is pretty much everything within healthcare. So it can sometimes be a barrier of what's the legal approach, what's the right thing. For many patients, they're absolutely an opportunity to collect their prescription at 10 o'clock at night when they finish their shift. For others, it's more challenging. So if their items are fridge lines or they need controlled drugs, they can't go into those. So you find that you end up with a little challenge around equity and who can and can't use those resources. They are very expensive. You know, you mentioned £100,000, and that figure's probably about right for many of these devices. And we have seen pharmacies who've initiated them and then realised actually they're not really doing what they want to and giving them a return on investment, because patients sometimes need support with their medication. They need to ask questions. They want advice, and it's very difficult to do that from a machine. So it's about the evolution of how pharmacy and healthcare practice is working. We will potentially see more of these things. We've seen growth in the previous years of distance selling pharmacies where they deliver medicines to patients' home, the largest of which in the UK is Pharmacy to You, who deliver significant numbers of prescriptions to patients' homes each week, because that's what some people prefer from their convenience. Others absolutely want to go in and meet their local pharmacy team in their community so they can just ask the question about the different brand they've got this month. The tablets are a different colour, is this right? And have some of those reassurances. So it is evolution. We're seeing pharmacies invest in robot technology. We have pharmacies in Sleaford that have a dispensing robot that takes away some of the day-to-day maintenance of prescription items. So instead of having a member of staff put something on a shelf, then 20 minutes later take it off a shelf again to give to a patient, the robot is doing the majority of that work, which frees up time for people to then provide care to customers and patients that come in. But again, those machines start at £100,000. We see the evolution, and thankfully legislative change has enabled us to look at hub and spoke models where one pharmacy will do the dispensing for another pharmacy, and we're seeing that come through at the moment. But some large organisations like Boots and Lloyds beforehand have off-site dispensing facilities that again use automation at scale to be able to dispense prescriptions. So they take workload out of those pharmacies, which means that you can reduce your staffing costs but still provide the same level of care. So we are seeing changes within technology, but it comes back to my first point of that investment comes from the pharmacy's own pocket. There is no central funding for that level of technological adaptation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have Councillor Watt next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Once again, we can see information sharing coming up in these discussions about healthcare being really critical. I remember over 10 years ago, a colleague waxing lyrical about the Swedish system, where you have an ID number, not an ID card, an ID number that you give whenever you move to a new place. You give it to your optician, your pharmacy, GP, and so on. And they just get all the relevant information that they need. This national system that we keep talking about can't come quick enough. If it works something like that, it will make everyone's job so much easier, I think. I'm also pleased that we're talking about, provision of local care. I mentioned at the last meeting, Chairman, about neighbourhood area committees. and that was alluded to earlier. I think, I hope that pharmacies will have a seat at the table when we are talking about those when we get to that point. If you have any thoughts on that, I would like to hear them. I think in the last meeting, it was said by the outgoing Director of Public Health that the GMC contract with GPs was inadequate, like nationally, not just here. We can't put GPs where they are needed. And we're also seeing the same sort of patchy kind of service as a consequence. And it seems to be that a lot of the difficulties you're talking about are similar for pharmacies. So is there a case that, you know, we need to fundamentally relook at, as a nation? It's not perhaps within our purview here as such, both the GMC and the CPCF, if I've got the right acronym correct, to obviously improve that provision, look at the relationship between government and pharmacies, because you've mentioned as well capital investment. Like, you need to have bricks and mortar. It doesn't make sense to have pharmacies working side by side. They should be merged in certain places. And they also need, as you say, that capital investments to provide the services that are required, especially in rural areas like ours. So I'd be very interested to hear your points, your thoughts on those points. Thank you.
So it's probably going to be a bit of a dual act. If I could come in from an ICB perspective and an East Midlands perspective around your question on the integrated neighbourhood and inclusion of community pharmacy, I absolutely agree with you. Community pharmacy needs to have a seat at that table, and that's going to need development as the conversations progress. And I think it's from a strategic and commissioner point of view, it's important that we ensure that the elements around community pharmacy are embedded as part of the service specifications and the framework, the neighbourhood frameworks that will be developed. I think that also what will support that and how neighbourhoods look at how they commission to address their local population health needs, the national commissioning framework to commission IP, for example, in community pharmacy will be really helpful, but how we can utilise the sector to address other local needs. In terms of the other part to that, in terms of how community pharmacies see themselves at the seat at the table, and I'll hand over to Paul to answer.
Thank you, Shazia. Historically, it's been challenging for community pharmacies to get seats at any tables with discussions for the fundamental reason that I can't leave the pharmacy premises, otherwise all activity needs to stop, and then I'm in breach of my NHS contract. What we have seen, thankfully, is legislative change which will enable and facilitate that at a national level from the General Pharmaceutical Council who oversee that, and some significant changes to the human medicines regulations. So from January this year, bagged and checked prescriptions can be handed out when the pharmacist is not available, which is something that as a pharmacist we've been calling for an awfully long time, because if I deliver your medication, that's fine, but if I pop out for lunch to get a sandwich, you can't hand out a medicine that I've already seen, I've already checked, reviewed, and determined that that is safe and ready for the patient to collect. That legislation has changed, so we're seeing pharmacy contractors now embracing that a little bit more. Admittedly, from what I can understand, a little cautiously, because we're a cautious bunch, but it is positive. From potentially December this year, we'll see the second part of that legislative change come in place, which will mean that pharmacy technicians can supervise dispensing activities and potentially the sale of some pharmacy-based medicines in the absence of a pharmacist. So pharmacy technicians are another registered pharmacy professional in their own right, with significant training and skill sets, but historically, again, those activities need to stop if I disappear for lunch for half an hour. That will change. It means that actually the pharmacy can stay available. That means as a pharmacist, potentially I can use other regulation. Pharmacy is heavily regulated and very confusing. The responsible pharmacist regulations, which means I could potentially go and join a local multidisciplinary team meeting for half an hour, for an hour at a time, while still maintaining pharmaceutical care from my pharmacy, while still being able to meet the terms of my NHS contract. But suddenly I'm freed from the chains of being tied into that dispensary, and that can't come soon enough. So absolutely, we're starting to see the shift of this is the NHS coming together to actually look at what neighbourhood and community level care will look like, but we're needing to see change enable that from a pharmacy perspective. I anticipate it will be a hesitant and cautious process because we're new to those tables in some of those locations. As a local pharmaceutical committee, Community Pharmacy Lincolnshire does our best to do that at a county level, but we can't be present in every single neighbourhood discussion at a local level. So we want local pharmacists, local pharmacy teams to be part of those local discussions within their neighbourhood teams so that they can look at what are the challenges, what are the cares facing. It's going to be very different for providing care within a neighbourhood that involves places like the East Coast compared to Stamford, Bourne and those other areas, because the health needs are fundamentally different because of the population needs. So it is exciting. How that fits within funding and national negotiations with the General Medical Services contracts, who knows? Part of the difficulty we have is whilst we're trying to negotiate the community pharmacy contractual framework, it's being done in parallel with the general medical changes, not necessarily together. There is overlap, and of course at a national level we speak to GP colleagues, we speak to medics, we speak to the BMA and look at what are the key pinch points, how do we agree? Pharmacy First was one of those that was agreed between both that this was a way of moving forwards, but still a way to go, I think, for those things yet.
Really interesting. I hadn't considered the logistics of you having a difficulty getting a sandwich at lunchtime, actually. But in terms of from a strategic point of view, really, really important contribution. Looking at, and it does worry me that perhaps there isn't enough coordination between what we're looking at in terms of GPs and pharmacies. Something to take back and talk to colleagues about. But thank you very much and for addressing the strategic element of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Morgan next, please.
Thank you very much. As before with our ambulance service, thank you for the work that you're doing in the community. Absolutely vital. I'm actually an NHS campaigner. And one of the things that has kind of struck me listening to you and looking at your report is that I don't think there's really the recognition within the public about how critical the situation is with the pharmacies. I really don't think it's there. And you rarely actually see any specific campaigning or lobbying of MPs or Parliament in the same way you do about other NHS services. So it's some homework for me to take away, I think. But I would, first of all, I've got a few points. First of all, I think it was really interesting about the funding situation you have regarding the medicines and how that's actually impacting as well on the patients and their treatment at the pharmacists on the shop floor because they don't understand. And I will confess, it never even occurred to me that the NHS weren't actually paying for the meds when I fill in my prescription. It's actually the pharmacists paying for it. It never had actually ever occurred to me. But it didn't occur to me. I wonder how many people out there have any idea about that and the shortfall in that funding. I bet they don't. So I think that it wouldn't do any harm to perhaps do a bit more public awareness on that front. I have a really great local pharmacy in my ward, and one of the points which hasn't been touched on, but I know it's an issue they've got, is vehicle security. Because they deliver drugs in their little van and go off around the community, that one of the problems they're having is where to securely leave that vehicle, because you've got like one driver and the vehicle's now left with a load of drugs. So be quite interested to know if you're coming across issues around that. Now the other thing is, which is terribly sad and I personally think appalling, you mentioned the aggression towards pharmacies, but I'm aware that there has been racial comments made. Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely unforgivable, and I'll be quite interested to know if that's being picked up with your research. I would like to suggest, if I dare, to our chair, that we're noting the contents of the report, but I'm wondering if we could do more as a committee. Is there something we could do that ask you to perhaps write to our MPs or perhaps a minister as appropriate to highlight how important this is, because reading this report, to me, this is alarming. You know, this is worse than the GP situation, actually. It's worse. The timescale for this hitting us is nearer. So I just feel we've got to start ringing alarm bells. I thought the recommendations from the House of Lords, which is in our report on page 118, perhaps if we could ask them to support that as well and lobby for us, if it's possible, if people are in agreement with that proposal. Thank you.
I'll come back on that one. Can I just clarify on that table that is in the report, are those the House of Lords recommendations, or are they the pharmacy national body recommendations, or are they an amalgamation of the two?
They're an amalgamation of the two reports from the House of Lords and the medicine shortage reports from the Royal Pharmaceutical Society.
There is a link in there to the...
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I read those, and I did sort of think the same thing crossed my mind, I have to say, Councillor Morgan, thank you for that. No other speakers, so I've just one question on my own, and it is about GP dispensaries. Could you just outline what the ICB's, how can I put it, fallback position, contractual obligation or powers are to ensure that a GP does actually offer a dispensary in an area where a community pharmacy is far too distant from the GP surgery, or from the people that are in its catchment area? Thank you.
Okay, I'm quite happy to answer that question. It's the regulated service, and if you wish to become a dispensing GP practice, although the dispensing rights sit within the GMS or the PMS contract of the GP practice, they have to go through the pharmaceutical regulations to apply to be a dispensing GP practice. Which is a heavily regulated service, as we know, and that would go through what is known as a market entry application. That then is processed through the ICB and goes to a committee, and the committee then have to look at the regulations to see whether it is lawful for that GP dispensing practice to exist. We do in Lincolnshire have several GP dispensing practices. I think as today we're sat with 54 purely because of the rurality of the county itself. A lot of those dispensing GP practices were awarded the right through historical and premise rights. In other words, they were there long before the community pharmacies started to open up and move into some of the village and rural areas. So the two have coexisted quite harmlessly for many years, particularly in this county. What we are finding from an ICB point of view, and this is in some ways linked with community pharmacy, it is becoming less attractive for GP practices to maintain their dispensing rights purely because of the initial costs and outlay that it does cost the GP practice as well. Also, patients themselves have moved on. We've mentioned about distance selling pharmacies, you know, people that work around the clock particularly don't have the ability to nip into the GP practice to pick up their medications because the GP practice is only open for a smaller window perhaps, whereas some community pharmacies, we have I think 9 in Lincolnshire that are still delivering 100-hour contracts, so they're open a lot longer, they're in more convenient situations, some of them are in supermarkets, and as a working person that might be more convenient for you to use those facilities, and that comes down to patient choice and nomination. We do try to work hard with our dispensing GP practices to maintain those facilities in the areas of the county, but sometimes it is down to individuals. The other thing is as well, if a GP decides to retire, you know, which at some point we all hope and strive to do, then if there's not a GP that wants to take on that practice, then those historical rights under the law will automatically cease to exist. So it does leave that service out of the equation.
Thank you for that. Has anyone else any questions? If not, we'll move to... Sorry, Councillor Pessel.
Thank you, Chairman. My brain has finally switched back on. I just have one question in that, do you have any way of putting forward a case for Section 116 funds through the NHS resources, because it's not only GPs that are affected by expanding populations, but also pharmacy services as well? And if not, are communications going on for that to be amended?
We do work quite closely with local authorities on Section 106 monies, and as you're probably aware, it is a bit of a bid. So once we are made aware that there's Section 106 funds available, the ICB, my colleagues, will actually put a bid in there, and they look at it holistically from health. So it might not necessarily be to fund an infrastructure of a particular pharmacy or something like that, but we do collectively look at multi-shared buildings now. We have some in other areas where housing developments, the housing developers will say, we will put a proportion of units where you could potentially put a GP practice in there. A community pharmacy has the right to move into those premises as well if they wish to. And we're also looking at combining that in some areas with like dental services and practices. So we are very active with the local authorities in trying to get that money and that funding there for resources.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, do you want to come back quickly? Oh.
Yeah, thank you. It's actually on this very subject, really. Be interesting to know how many of our local authorities have actually got within their local plans, have picked up pharmacies, the requirement to deliver those within the local plans, because I'm very aware there's a lot of emphasis on hospitals and GPs, but I don't think there is for pharmacies. And I said that being fairly familiar with our local plan, it's something I think we need to take away and look at. And certainly I know for dentists, our officers have in the past said we can't ask for, we can't include those, that it's not appropriate, although I would argue it is part of core infrastructure and health. So I think it's something we need to look at, actually.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Mr. Fox, you like to come in.
Yes, thank you very much. The committee, I think, will recall that actually the legislation around sort of this area of pharmaceutical needs assessment gives a requirement to Health and Wellbeing Board in Lincolnshire to publish a 3-yearly pharmaceutical needs assessment to assess exactly that. Essentially, what's the population trends in growth, any new developments, and is pharmaceutical provision sufficient, using quite a broad brush definition of sufficient, normally around 20 minutes drive time, plus, you know, as has been said, distance selling practices. So that was published in 2025 and will be looked at normally. It's on a 3-yearly cycle, statutorily has to be done, and will be done. And of course, all parties who've been discussing are involved in that process. Would normally be done in sort of, we'd be working on that in 27. It's normally the Public Health Division that leads that and engages with colleagues. And any decisions that are made around expanding pharmaceutical provision have to have regards to the pharmaceutical needs assessment. So that's something the Health and Wellbeing Board holds statutorily. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd forgotten about the needs assessment. Thank you for reminding us all. So that winds up this item on the agenda. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our presenters. I think that's been a thorough and useful item, and it just leaves me to move to a proposal. And my proposal is that the presenters be thanked for their presentation on community pharmacy services in Lincolnshire and for answering the committee's question with such thoroughness. 2, that the committee expresses its concerns around security of supply of medicines and expresses its support for the key recommendations on page 118 of the agenda pack. And 3, that the committee requests a further position report from the Community Pharmacy Lincolnshire and the ICB in a year's time. Does anyone wish to add anything to that? No? No? Right, does anyone like to propose it? Do I have a proposer? Thank you. Councillor McGee.
Can you hear me now? Yes, you can. Councillor Morgan spoke about not just supporting those recommendations, but actually advocating at a higher level to the our MPs of the collective group here, because I think it's more than just going, yes, we support that. I think we actually need to advocate that this is an emergency situation. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. We can do that. Let me just think of some wording to add in. On the and expresses its key support for the key recommendations on page 118 of the agenda pack, and resolves to make local members of Parliament aware? Yeah. Is that okay? Thank you. Right, do I have a proposer, please? Councillor McGee, thank you. Second, Councillor Morgan. Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Anybody against? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Thank you again to our presenters. And we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the work programme. Chiara, you finally get to speak after 3 hours nearly.
That's absolutely fine, Chairman. In the interest of saving time, I just want to say that at this point I've had no changes to the published work programme, and I do welcome members of this committee to either speak to now or approach me offline with your recommendations in relation to items that you would like to see included in the work programme. Thank you.
Thanks, Chiara. I think I saw Councillor McGee first and then Councillor Mackinson-Saunders.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that I contacted you with
did.
regards, and is that discussion
That's ongoing.
Fabulous, thank you.
Out. We won't forget you. Councillor Mackinson-Saunders.
Could we look at the pain service in Lincolnshire, please?
We can have a look at that. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anything on this? Okay, so we... Oh, sorry, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you. I know we've looked at this before, but I think it's worth us being kept updated. That was the point was made about Section 106 funding and how it's being used or not being used was sadly the case.
It is. I think you know that it's an issue that's dear to my heart, and we have had conversations about that. And I will actually put a note out to members of the committee about some concerns that I have, and we can see how we might want to take that forward as a committee in future. Thank you. Yeah. And nobody else? Okay. So the actions required are to note the confirmed items of business for the forthcoming meetings of the committee are set out in section 1, and to identify any reports for inclusion, which we've done. So I take the work programme as noted, and your comments and requests have also been noted, which means that we've now concluded the business of the meeting, and thank you for attending. Thank you.